What if I told you that a baby, barely a year and a half old, managed to see true love better than any adult? That an inconsolable child found peace in the arms of the most unlikely person? This is the story of how a small, innocent heart united two completely different worlds and proved that love doesn't understand social classes or conventions. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching this video from? Leave it in the comments. And if you believe in second chances and destinies that cross in magical ways, subscribe to the channel and leave that like to show your support. Now, prepare for a story that will stir all your emotions. The clock read 3:27 a.m. when William Harrison gave up on trying to sleep. His eyes burned with exhaustion, but Mason's shrill cries pierced the walls of the luxury penthouse like a sharp blade. He ran his hands over his face, feeling the incipient stubble scratch his palms, calloused from clenching his fists in frustration. 48 years of life, a real estate empire that moved millions monthly, and there he was, completely powerless before a year-and-a-half-old baby who rejected him as if he were a dangerous stranger. "Mason, please," William murmured, entering the nautical-themed nursery, its blue and white walls meant to convey serenity, but which now only seemed the backdrop for his failure as a father. "Daddy's here, son." The child was standing in the crib, clutching the bars like a small prisoner, his face red and wet from crying. When he saw William approach, Mason wailed even louder, throwing his body back and hitting his head against the mattress. "No, no," he screamed in his still limited language, stretching his little arms not toward his father, but into the void, as if crying out for someone who was no longer there. William felt a knot in his chest. He knew exactly who his son was looking for. Elizabeth, his wife, who had passed away exactly 1 year and 2 months ago, taken by a pulmonary embolism that no doctor foresaw. One morning she was planning Mason's first birthday party, and by nightfall William was at the hospital, watching the love of his life extinguish like a candle without air. "I know you miss Mommy," William said, his voice cracking. "I miss her too, son. Every single day." He tried to pick the child up, but Mason reacted with surprising strength for someone so small. He bit his father's arm with his few teeth, scratching his neck with his tiny nails. William recoiled, more from the emotional pain than the physical. The bedroom door opened and Brenda appeared, the 8th nanny in 2 months, a woman in her 50s, with impeccable credentials and 20 years of experience. She had only lasted 4 days. "Mr. Harrison, I am so sorry, but I cannot continue," she said, her eyes red from lack of sleep. "This child needs professional help. It's not normal for a toddler to have so much rage." "He doesn't have rage, Brenda. He has grief," William replied, tired of explaining the obvious. "Whatever it is, it's beyond my pay grade. I've already packed my bags. I'm leaving right now." And just like that, at 4 in the morning on a Tuesday in March, William found himself alone again, completely alone with a son who hated him, a company that demanded his attention, and a heart so broken he could barely recognize himself in the mirror. He grabbed his phone and called Amanda, his personal secretary, ignoring the hour. "Mr. Harrison," she answered, clearly startled. "Post an ad. Salary of $15,000. I want someone here today. I don't care if the person has experience or not. I need someone who can make my son stop suffering." "Yes, sir, but it's 4 in the morning. "I know what time it is, Amanda." William exploded, instantly regretting it. "I'm sorry. Please, as soon as the sun comes up, just handle it." He hung up and looked at Mason, who had finally exhausted himself from crying and was sleeping, sitting up, leaning against the crib bars, his face still wet with tears. William sat on the floor next to the crib, resting his head against the cold wall. Outside, through the penthouse's panoramic windows, Miami Beach was beginning to wake up. The lights of the coast glittered in the distance, and the waters of Biscayne Bay reflected the first colors of dawn. But inside that $15 million apartment, there was only darkness and despair. William closed his eyes, exhausted, and for the first time in months, he did something he had stopped doing. He prayed. "If there's anyone up there, if Elizabeth can hear me from wherever she is, please, send me a sign. Send me someone who can save my son, because I'm failing." He didn't know that, at that precise moment, just a few miles away in the working-class neighborhoods of Hialeah, a 26-year-old woman was finishing her night shift cleaning offices and preparing for another day of survival. A young woman whose destiny was about to intertwine with his, in a way that not even the most optimistic screenwriter would dare to imagine. The sun rose over Miami, bringing with it the promise of a new day, and with it, the promise that sometimes miracles arrive in the most unlikely disguises. Ivy Miller mopped the lobby floor of the Brickell Financial Tower with mechanical movements, the result of years of practice. It was 5:40 a.m., and she was almost finished with her shift. Her knees ached, her hands were rough even through the gloves, but she didn't stop. She never stopped. At 26, Ivy had the face of someone who had aged too quickly. Not with wrinkles. Her skin was still smooth and tan, framed by brown hair always pulled back in a tight bun, but in her eyes. Her brown eyes held the depth of someone who had seen too much, suffered too much, but had decided to keep standing despite it all. "Ivy, can you cover the 8th floor hallway today?" "Sharon fell ill," asked Marta, the supervisor, a plump woman who always treated Ivy with a mixture of pity and respect. "Of course, Marta. But it'll have to be after 7 because I need to stop by the hospital before I go home. Has your mother gotten worse?" Ivy bit her lower lip, a nervous tic she'd had since childhood. "Not worse, but not better. The doctors want to run new tests. More expenses." Marta sighed, placing a hand on Ivy's shoulder. "You're a warrior, kid. God will reward you for everything you do for your mother." Ivy managed a weak smile. She didn't put much stock in divine promises anymore. If God existed, he seemed to have forgotten her address a long time ago. 2 hours later, she was at Bayside General Hospital, sitting by the bed where her mother, Irene, slept connected to tubes and machines. Irene was only 52, but the rare disease attacking her nervous system made her look 80. Her thin body barely made a lump under the white sheet. "Hi, Mom," Ivy whispered, taking the woman's fragile hand. "I'm here. I brought you those mints you like so much." Irene opened her eyes slowly and a faint smile formed on her chapped lips. "My daughter, did you work all night again?" "I like the night shift, Mom. It's quieter, and it pays a little better. You're going to make yourself sick. You need to rest, Ivy." "I rest, I do. Don't worry about me." But it was a lie. Ivy barely slept 4 hours a day. She worked from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. at the tower, then went to the hospital to visit her mother, and sometimes took extra jobs ironing or caring for the elderly in the afternoons, all to pay for the experimental medications that insurance wouldn't cover. The nurse manager, Ms. Evans, a woman in her 40s with a permanent air of severity, entered the room. "Ms. Miller, I need to speak with you." Ivy's heart hammered. Conversations with the nurse manager were never good news. "This month's bill comes to $17,400. If we don't receive a substantial payment by Friday, we'll have to move your mother to the general wing. She won't have access to the experimental treatment there." Ivy felt the world spin. $17,000. She earned $2,300 a month cleaning the building. Where would she get $17,000 in 3 days? "Ma'am, please, I always pay. I might be a little late, but I pay. My mother will die if she stops the treatment now." "I can't do anything, Ms. Miller. Those are orders from hospital administration. I'm very sorry." After the nurse left, Ivy lowered her head and cried silently, still holding her mother's hand. Irene, though weak, squeezed back. "Daughter, let me go. You're killing yourself for me." "Don't say that." Ivy raised her head, her eyes burning. "You're all I have in the world, Mom. I'll find a solution. I always do." But this time, for the first time in years of fighting, Ivy truly didn't know how. She left the hospital as the sun was high, walking through the streets of Miami toward the bus stop. She passed jewelry stores, expensive clothing boutiques, restaurants where a single dish cost more than she earned in a week. 2 worlds coexisted in the same city, hers, made of past due bills and calloused hands, and theirs, made of luxury penthouses and imported cars. Her phone rang. It was Marta. "Ivy, I've got an opportunity for you. Sharon is going to be out for a month. I need you to cover her day shift at the Brickell Tower. It's Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. They pay 50% more. Do you want it?" Ivy did the mental math. With both shifts, she could maybe scrape together $4,000 in a month. Still not enough, but it was better than nothing. "I'll take it. When do I start?" "Tomorrow. But there's one thing. You'll have to clean the residential floors, including the penthouse. You've never had to interact with the residents before, have you?" "Never. I've always worked overnight." "Well, brace yourself. These rich folks can be complicated." Ivy hung up and looked at the blue March sky. She didn't know that complicated would be the least of her problems. She didn't know that by walking through that door the next day, her life would change forever. The next morning, Ivy arrived at the Brickell Financial Tower at 8:40 a.m., 15 minutes before her new shift began. She wore her navy blue uniform with her name embroidered on the pocket, her hair pulled back even more tightly than usual, and an expression of determination that hid her nervousness. Marta met her at the reception with a new cleaning cart filled with special products. "You're going to start on the residential floors. Remember, total discretion. These residents pay a lot of money for privacy. Don't stare, don't ask questions, just do your job and leave." "Got it," Ivy replied, pushing the cart toward the elevators. "Oh, and Ivy?" Marta called out again. "The penthouse, Mr. Harrison's place, is having complicated situations. If he's there, be extra careful. He's under a lot of stress." Ivy nodded and entered the elevator. When the doors closed, she allowed herself a moment of weakness. She pressed her forehead against the cold mirror and took a deep breath. "You can do this. It's just another day of work. You can do this." She started on the 8th floor, cleaning the hallway impeccably. On the 11th, an elderly resident stopped her to complain about a spot on the carpet. On the 14th, a man in a suit ignored her completely, speaking loudly on his phone about an export deal. Parallel worlds that never touched, until she reached the top floor. The 16th, the penthouse. The elevator opened directly into the private foyer. Ivy pushed her cart out, but something was different. Toys were scattered on the floor. A teddy bear, building blocks, a pacifier, and there was a sound. A cry. A desperate child's cry. She hesitated. Should she ring the bell? Come back later? But Marta had been clear. The penthouse needed to be cleaned today. She rang the bell. No one answered. The crying continued, now louder, more distressed. Ivy felt something tighten in her chest. It was an instinct she didn't know she possessed, a primitive call that every woman carries somewhere in her soul. She rang again. Nothing. The door was slightly ajar. "Excuse me?" she called out, pushing the door open slowly. "Cleaning service. Is anyone home?" The apartment was stunning. Double-height ceilings, floor-to-ceiling windows with views of the ocean, furniture that she knew cost more than she would earn in her entire life. But it wasn't the opulence that captured her attention. It was the man on his knees in the middle of the living room, holding a baby who was twisting and screaming in his arms. William Harrison was unrecognizable. His graying hair was disheveled, his white shirt wrinkled, and there were deep, dark circles under his blue eyes. He looked at Ivy as if she were a ghost. "I'm sorry, the door was open and I heard—" Ivy began to explain, taking a step back. But then it happened. Mason, who until that moment had been struggling violently in his father's arms, turned his little head toward Ivy, his eyes red from crying fixed on her, and to William's absolute astonishment, the baby held out his little arms. "Ivy," Mason said, his voice still hoarse from screaming. "Ivy!" William froze. Ivy did too. He's calling for you," William murmured in disbelief. Mason was now squirming, not in anger but in anxiety, wanting to get out of his father's arms and go to this unknown woman in a blue uniform who had just walked into his home. "I don't know if I should—" Ivy hesitated, but her arms were already extending instinctively. "Please," William said, and there was so much supplication in that single word that Ivy felt her heart break. "Please, take him. He hasn't stopped crying for 2 days." Ivy let go of the cleaning cart and walked slowly toward them. When she got close, Mason practically lunged into her arms, and then something magical happened. The baby wrapped his chubby little arms around Ivy's neck, buried his face in the curve between her shoulder and neck, and let out a sigh so deep it seemed to carry months of tension. Immediately after, he kissed her cheek with his lips, wet from crying, and closed his eyes. In less than a minute, Mason was asleep. Ivy stood completely still, afraid that any movement would break the impossible moment. Her hands held the child with a natural delicacy, as if she had done this millions of times before. But she had never cared for babies. She had never had time to start a family, and yet there she was, holding this child as if he had always been hers. William covered his mouth with his hand, his eyes welling with tears. It took him almost a minute to be able to speak. How did you do that?" "I didn't do anything," Ivy whispered, still in shock. "I just held him. He doesn't let anyone hold him, not even me, especially not me." William's voice failed him. "He hates me. He doesn't hate you." Ivy looked at the man kneeling in front of her, and for the first time she saw past the expensive suit and the luxury penthouse. She saw a broken father. He's in pain. And pain in a child is different. They don't know how to process it, they only know how to scream. "Do you have experience with children?" "No, but I know what it's like to lose someone and not know how to express it." William looked at her as if he were truly seeing her for the first time. Not the cleaning uniform, not the employee, but the person. The young woman with sad eyes who knew exactly what his son was feeling. "What's your name?" "Ivy. Ivy Miller. William Harrison." "And this little rebel is Mason." A strange silence settled between them, broken only by the soft breathing of the sleeping baby. Outside, the sea gently lapped the shore of Miami Beach. Inside that apartment, two worlds that should never have touched had just collided, and neither of them knew that this was only the beginning. Ivy stood there for nearly 20 minutes, with Mason sleeping in her arms. William didn't move from where he was, still on his knees, simply watching the scene as if witnessing a miracle. Finally, it was Ivy who broke the silence. "He must be exhausted. Can I put him in his crib?" "You can try, but he wakes up as soon as he feels he's not being held," William replied, standing up slowly, as if a sudden move might wake the child. "Which way is his room?" William led her down the hall to the nautical-themed room. Ivy looked around, taking in every detail: the blue walls, the small boats, the rocking chair next to the crib, the framed photos of a beautiful woman holding a newborn Mason, the deceased wife, she assumed. With gentle movements, Ivy began to lay Mason in the crib. He stirred a little, but when Ivy began to hum a soft, wordless tune, something her own mother used to do when she was little, the baby settled and continued to sleep. William was leaning against the doorframe, and when Ivy turned, she saw he was crying silently. Tears streamed down his tired face, but he was smiling. He hasn't slept like that since Elizabeth died, a year and 2 months ago. Ivy didn't know what to say, so she just motioned for them to leave the room. In the hallway, William wiped his face with his hands, visibly embarrassed. "Forgive me. I'm not one to cry in front of strangers." "It's okay. And I'm not a stranger. I'm just the cleaner," Ivy said, trying to lighten the moment. "No, you're much more than that. What you just did is—" "I have no words." William took a deep breath, as if making an important decision. "Ivy, I know this is going to sound absurd, but I need to make you a proposition." "A proposition?" "I want you to work for me, not as a cleaner, as Mason's nanny." Ivy blinked, confused. "Mr. Harrison, I have no experience with children. I've been working in cleaning for 6 years. I've never taken care of anyone but my mother." "Exactly. I've hired 8 experienced nannies in the last 2 months, all with impeccable resumes, diplomas, references, and Mason rejected every single one, biting, scratching, spitting. But you walk in here and in 1 minute he's asleep in your arms. That's not experience, Ivy. That's a gift." Ivy took a few steps back, shaking her head. "I can't. I have my mother in the hospital. She needs me. And I've already accepted the day shift here in the building. I need the money. How much do you make a month?" That's not your business, Mr. Harrison." "William, call me William. And you're right, it's not my business. But I'm going to make you an offer anyway, $15,000 a month, Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, weekends off. And if your mother needs care, I can get her the best private doctors in Miami." Ivy felt her legs go weak. $15,000. It was more than she earned in half a year. "Mr. William, why would you do this for me? You don't even know me." "Because my son chose you. And frankly, I trust his judgment more than my own right now." William stepped closer, and Ivy could see the sincerity in his blue eyes. "Look, I understand your hesitation. This is weird, I know. But Mason has been suffering since Elizabeth died. I was losing my son, Ivy, and in 5 minutes with you, he slept for the first time in 2 days. That's worth much more than $15,000. Ivy thought of her mother in the hospital, of the $17,000 she owed, the 3-day deadline, the threat of being moved to the general wing, where they would stop the treatment. I need to think about it. How much time do you need?" "Until tomorrow." William hesitated, then nodded. "All right, but let me give you my card. If you change your mind sooner, call me, anytime." He pulled an elegant wallet from his pocket and extracted a card. "William Harrison, CEO Harrison Properties." Ivy took the card with trembling fingers and tucked it into her uniform pocket. "I'm going to finish cleaning and I'll go if you'll excuse me." "Of course. And Ivy," she turned. "Thank you, seriously. Thank you for today." Ivy just nodded and went to get her cleaning cart. She worked on autopilot through the penthouse, her mind anywhere but there. $15,000. The best doctors. The chance to save her mother. But there was something else that unsettled her. It wasn't just the money, it was the way Mason had looked at her, the way he cuddled into her arms. The way, for the first time in years, She felt she could be useful for something more than mopping floors and wiping counters. When she finished, William was in his office, on the phone. He saw her pass, gave a small wave, and she returned the gesture. In the elevator on the way down, Ivy pulled the card from her pocket and stared at it. A decision that could change her entire life. A decision that was as terrifying as it was seductive. When she arrived at the hospital that afternoon, her mother was awake and a little better. Ivy told her everything that had happened. Irene held her daughter's hands with what little strength she had. "Daughter, sometimes God sends us angels disguised as opportunities. Don't let fear stop you from living." "But Mom, what if I don't know how to take care of him? What if I mess it all up?" "That baby chose you, Ivy. Children know things that adults forget. They feel people's hearts. And your heart is good." Ivy cried on her mother's shoulder, and when she left the hospital she knew what her decision would be. She took out her phone and dialed the number on the business card. "Hello?" William answered. "It's me, Ivy. I accept." On the other end of the line there was a pause, and then, "You won't regret this. I promise you." But neither of them could have predicted how much that promise would be tested in the coming months. Ivy's first week caring for Mason was a revelation for everyone involved. The first day, when she arrived at 9 in the morning with a simple backpack containing her belongings, William was waiting for her in the private foyer with a mixture of hope and nervousness. "Good morning, Ivy. Ready for the challenge?" "As ready as I'll ever be," she replied with a shy smile. Mason was in the living room, sitting on his activity mat, but as soon as he heard Ivy's voice, his little head whipped around so fast he almost lost his balance. His eyes lit up. "Ivy!" he shouted, clapping his hands awkwardly and crawling toward her. Ivy crouched down and picked him up, and the baby immediately started giving her wet little kisses on her face, something William had never seen him do with anyone but Elizabeth. "I think he remembers me," Ivy said, moved. "Remembers you? He hasn't stopped saying Ivy, Ivy, Ivy since you left yesterday." William laughed, but there was a hint of sadness in his voice. "I finally got a full night's sleep. He slept straight through until 7. William spent the first hour explaining Mason's routine, feeding schedules, naps, diapers, favorite toys, but he quickly realized that Ivy had a natural instinct that made instructions unnecessary. She anticipated the baby's needs before he even started to fuss. When Mason started to get grumpy around lunchtime, Ivy simply prepared the vegetable puree, sat with him in her arms in the high chair, and began to sing as she offered each spoonful. The baby ate eagerly, something that hadn't happened in weeks. "How do you know all those songs?" William asked, fascinated, watching from the kitchen doorway. "My mum used to sing them to me when I was little. I never forgot them." Ivy wiped Mason's mouth gently. "Songs have a way of calming people, you know, no matter the age." On the third day, something extraordinary happened. William was in the penthouse office on a video call with investors from Argentina when he heard laughter coming from the living room. Not just Mason's giggles, but thunderous, childish belly laughs. He quickly excused himself from the meeting and went to see what was happening. Ivy was on the floor, pretending to be a monster chasing Mason. The baby was crawling as fast as he could, looking back and laughing uncontrollably as Ivy chased him in slow motion, making funny noises. William froze in the doorway. How long had it been since he heard his son laugh like that? Ivy saw him and stopped immediately, getting to her feet and smoothing her uniform. "Sorry, we were being loud." No, keep going. Please, keep going." William sat on the sofa, his eyes shining. "Don't stop on my account." Mason crawled to his father and, to William's absolute shock, climbed up his legs and held out his arms to be picked up. For the first time in over a year, the child wanted his father's arms. William picked him up with trembling hands, and Mason snuggled into his chest, still panting from laughter. The businessman looked at Ivy with tears in his eyes. "You're working magic here." "It's not magic. It's affection." "It's what he needed." Ivy smiled, but there was sadness in her eyes. Every child deserves to feel loved. William realized there were layers to that sentence. Untold stories, unshared pain. In the second week, Mason began to talk more. Besides Ivy, he learned to say Daddy when he saw William, Wawa for water, and Mommy when he saw photos of Elizabeth. Ivy never tried to replace his mother's memory. On the contrary, she set up a small display of Elizabeth's photos in Mason's room and showed him the pictures every day. "Look, Mason, this is your mommy. She's in heaven, watching over you. She loves you so much." William observed this scene one day and had to leave the room so he wouldn't cry in front of them. This woman, who barely knew Elizabeth, was honoring her memory with a reverence that not even his own relatives showed. At the end of the second week, When William paid Ivy's first salary, in advance because he knew she needed it, she cried when she saw the amount in her account. "Thank you. You don't know what this means to me," she said, her voice thick. "I'm the one who should be thanking you. You saved my son, Ivy. You saved me too." It was in that moment, with the March sun streaming through the windows and Mason playing with blocks on the rug, that William allowed himself to think the impossible. Maybe life could be good again. But what he didn't know was that the real test was yet to come. A month passed since Ivy started working in the penthouse, and Mason's transformation was undeniable. The baby who used to spend his days crying now woke up smiling, eagerly looking for Ivy as soon as he opened his eyes. But it wasn't just Mason who was changing. William began to realize that he eagerly awaited the mornings, not for the coffee prepared by the private chef he had hired, nor for the spectacular ocean view that unfolded from his windows, but for Ivy's arrival at 9 o'clock sharp, always punctual, always with that shy smile that lit up the entire apartment. It was an April morning, and William was working in his office when he heard Ivy singing in the living room. He saved the file he was editing and went quietly to the door to watch. Ivy was sitting on the floor with Mason in her lap, a children's book open in front of them. She read each page with different voices for each character, making Mason laugh and clap. She was wearing a simple cotton dress. William had insisted she no longer needed to wear the cleaner's uniform, and her hair was down for the first time, falling in natural waves over her shoulders. In that moment, with the morning light creating a halo around her, William felt something shift in his chest, something he was sure had died when he buried Elizabeth. "William?" Ivy's voice pulled him from his thoughts. "Did you need something?" "No, I was just watching." "How you two seem to be having fun." "Mason loves this story about the duckling. We've already read it 3 times today," she smiled, and William noticed for the first time the small dimple on her left cheek. "Ivy, will you eat here today? I asked the chef to make that risotto you liked last week." "William, you don't need to do that. I can bring food from home." "I know I don't need to, but I want to." "Mason likes it when we eat together too, right, champ?" "Daddy!" Mason held his arms out to his father, and William picked him up, his heart warming at the simple gesture that once seemed impossible. During lunch, they talked about trivial things, the weather, the news, Mason's development, but there was something else hanging in the air, a tension neither of them knew how to name. "Is your mother doing better?" William asked, cutting a piece of risotto. "Much better. The doctors you recommended are working miracles. She can already sit up on her own." Ivy paused, her voice thick with emotion. "I can never thank you enough for this. You thank me every day by taking care of Mason. It's a fair trade." "No, it's not. What I do doesn't compare to what you've done for my mother." William put his fork down and looked at her directly. "Ivy, you need to understand something. What you do for Mason, for me, it's priceless. You've given us our lives back. So please stop thinking you're indebted to me. We're a team now." A team. The words echoed in Ivy's mind for the rest of the day. In the afternoon, while Mason napped, William cancelled an important meeting to stay home. He found Ivy on the terrace, looking out at the sea. "Can I join you?" he asked. "It's your house," she smiled without looking at him. "But it's your break space while you're working." They stood in silence for a few minutes, just listening to the sound of the waves breaking on the sand. "You know, Elizabeth loved this view," William said finally. "She used to say the sea has a way of putting everything in perspective." It was the first time William had spoken of his wife to Ivy so personally. "She must have been an incredible woman. From what I see in the photos, from what Mason reflects of her, she was. And it was so hard to accept she was gone." "It still is sometimes." William turned to Ivy. "But in the last few months, for the first time since she died, I've been able to breathe without feeling a physical pain in my chest. And that's because of you." Ivy finally looked at him, and William saw confusion in her eyes. "William, I don't know if—" "You don't need to say anything. I just wanted you to know." But they both knew something had changed between them. Something beyond a professional relationship. Something as terrifying as it was attractive. That night after Ivy left, William stayed on the terrace for hours, looking at the sea Elizabeth had loved and thinking about the cleaner who had turned his life upside down. And in her small apartment in Hialeah, Ivy lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about the widowed businessman who made her feel things she never imagined she would feel. Two worlds, separated by social chasms, were beginning to build a bridge, a fragile, dangerous but irresistible bridge. May arrived, bringing milder temperatures to Miami, and with it, a routine that became increasingly intimate in William Harrison's penthouse. Mason, now almost 2, was starting to form short sentences, his vocabulary expanding daily, always with Ivy as his main teacher. It was a Saturday, technically Ivy's day off, but William had called her on Friday night, his voice hesitant. "Ivy, I know tomorrow is your day off, but I have an important business dinner. Would it be possible for you to stay with Mason for a few hours? I'll pay extra, of course." "William, you know you don't need to pay extra. Don't worry, I'll come." In truth, Ivy had felt strangely happy about the request. The weekends had become long and lonely since her mother left the hospital to live temporarily with an aunt in Fort Lauderdale to continue her recovery. When she arrived at the penthouse that Saturday afternoon, William opened the door, already wearing an immaculate charcoal suit, his greying hair combed back. Ivy's heart skipped a beat. "You look elegant," she commented, immediately regretting saying it. "Thank you. You look beautiful too. Is that dress new?" It was a simple dress Ivy had bought with part of her first salary, the first new item of clothing she'd bought in years. Floral, light yellow, nothing compared to what the women in William's social circle wore, but to her, it represented an immense luxury. "Yes, it is. It's the first time I've worn it. It's perfect on you." The moment was interrupted by Mason running to Ivy and hugging her legs. "Ivy! Ivy! Play!" He tugged her dress toward his room where his toys were. "Easy, champ. Let Daddy go to his dinner first." Ivy picked him up and looked at William. "You can go, don't worry. We'll be fine. The dinner is at Spat downtown. I'll be about 3 hours. Call me if anything happens." William kissed Mason's forehead, and on an impulse that surprised them both, also kissed Ivy's cheek. "Thank you for doing this." When the door closed, Ivy stood still, her hand on the cheek where William's lips had touched. It was just an innocent, thankful kiss, but it had left her skin tingling. The hours passed quickly. Ivy played with Mason, bathed him, and made him dinner. When she finally put him to bed, it was already 8 o'clock. William wasn't back yet. She was in the living room, flipping through a magazine, when she heard the door open. William entered, and she immediately knew something was wrong. He was pale, disheveled, and swaying slightly. "William, are you okay?" "I am. Just had a few too many drinks. Those investors love their scotch." He laughed humorlessly and collapsed onto the sofa. Ivy went to the kitchen and returned with a glass of water. "Drink this. It'll help. You take such good care of me. Of us." William took the glass but didn't drink. Instead, he just stared at Ivy with an intensity that left her breathless. "You know something. I think I'm the biggest idiot in the world." "Why?" "Because I'm at some ridiculous dinner, pretending to be interested in real estate investments, when the only thing I could think about was coming home to you." Ivy felt the world stop. "William, you've been drinking. You don't know what you're saying." "I know exactly what I'm saying. Maybe it's the first time in months I've had the courage to say it." He set the glass on the coffee table and stood up, swaying a bit. "Ivy, you've turned my whole house upside down. I can't stop thinking about you. I wake up thinking about you. I fall asleep thinking about you. And I know it's crazy. I know you must think I'm some ridiculous old man, but No, you're not ridiculous," Ivy interrupted, her voice barely a whisper. "And I think about you too." The silence that followed was deafening. William took a step toward her, then another. He was so close now that Ivy could smell his cologne mixed with the scotch he'd been drinking. "Ivy, I don't want you to feel pressured. You work for me, I know that. And if you want me to shut up and never bring this up again, I'll respect that. But I need you to know, I'm falling in love with you." Tears began to roll down Ivy's cheeks. "William, this can't happen. We're from different worlds. You're a businessman, I'm a cleaner. People will talk, they'll judge, To hell with people." He took her face in his hands. "Ivy, I spent a year of my life dead inside. You brought me back. You brought my son back. And if it's wrong for me to feel what I feel, then I don't want to be right. And Elizabeth? Elizabeth will always be a part of me. She was the love of my youth, the mother of my son. But she's gone, Ivy, and I need to keep living. She would want me to be happy." Ivy closed her eyes, feeling his warm hands on her face. "I'm so scared." "Me too. But maybe that's what makes it worth it." And then, with the full moon illuminating the living room through the panoramic windows, William Harrison kissed Ivy Miller for the first time. A soft kiss, almost asking for permission. And when she kissed him back, wrapping her arms around his neck, they both knew there was no turning back. They had crossed an invisible line. And now together, they would have to face the consequences. The days following the kiss were a blur of emotions for Ivy. For the first time in her adult life, she was allowing herself to feel something other than survival. William was transformed, lighter, smiling more. But reality was beginning to knock on the door. It was Amanda, William's secretary, who first noticed the change. One Tuesday morning, she came up to the penthouse to deliver some documents that needed an urgent signature. Ivy was in the kitchen preparing Mason's snack when Amanda walked in. The secretary, a woman of 35, always impeccably dressed, looked Ivy up and down with poorly concealed disdain. "You must be the new nanny," she said, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I am. Ivy Miller. Nice to meet you. Amanda Costa. I've worked with Mr. Harrison for 8 years." She emphasized the Mr., as if it were a title of ownership. "I heard you used to clean in the building." "Yes, that's right." "Lucky you, huh? Moving up from cleaner to nanny. Must be quite the jump." Ivy felt the sting, but kept her composure. "I am very lucky. Mason is a wonderful boy." William appeared just then, and his face lit up when he saw Ivy, a glow that did not go unnoticed by Amanda. "Amanda, good. You're here. The documents?" "Right here, Mr. Harrison. They all need to be signed by end of day." As William reviewed the papers, Amanda turned her attention to Mason, who was playing on the rug. "He's so big and so happy. You really have worked miracles with him, Ivy. William won't stop talking about you." The way she said, "won't stop talking about you," was loaded with insinuation. Ivy felt her cheeks burn. After Amanda left, William noticed Ivy's discomfort. "Did she say something to upset you?" "Not exactly, but William, people are going to start noticing. The way you look at me, the way I look at you." William took her hands. "And what if I don't care if they notice?" "But I care. For you. For Mason. You have a reputation to protect. An empire to maintain. And I'm just—" "Don't finish that sentence," he interrupted her firmly. "You're not just anything. You're incredible, strong, caring. And if people have a problem with that, it's their problem." But William's words, however sincere, didn't erase reality. A reality that became even clearer a few days later when Ivy went to a high-end grocery store in Miami Beach to pick up a few things for Mason. She was in the checkout line when she heard 2 women behind her talking. "Did you hear the gossip? William Harrison is dating his building's cleaner." "Seriously? Wow, he's barely buried Elizabeth and he's already with someone else. And a cleaner, for God's sake. Poor Elizabeth must be rolling in her grave. They say she's in her 20s, clearly a gold digger. Poor man, a vulnerable widower, easy prey for an opportunist." Ivy felt tears burning her eyes. She paid for her groceries quickly and almost ran out of the store. On the street she leaned against a wall and let the tears fall. Opportunist. Gold digger. Was that what people thought of her? When she returned to the penthouse, William knew immediately that something was wrong. "Ivy, what happened?" She told him about the conversation she'd overheard. William became furious. "Who were these women? I'll sue them for defamation. William, stop!" Ivy grabbed his arms. "That will only make it worse. It will prove they're right to talk." "But they're not right. They're being classist and cruel." "I know. But this is the real world. And in the real world, a millionaire businessman doesn't get involved with the cleaner without everyone judging him. So what are you saying? That we should stop? That we should pretend we don't feel anything for each other just because a few gossiping socialites don't approve?" Ivy looked at Mason, who was playing, oblivious, and then back at William. "I'm saying we have to be careful, that we have to protect Mason above all else, and that maybe we need to slow down." William took a deep breath, fighting his frustration. "Fine, we'll slow down, but Ivy, I guarantee you one thing. I am not going to let anyone disrespect you. You mean too much to me, to us." They didn't know that the supermarket conversation was just the beginning, and that soon someone very close to William would use that exact prejudice to try and destroy everything they were building. Ryan Harrison, William's cousin, had always been an uncomfortable presence in the family. At 42, he had the kind of superficial charm that fooled the unwary, but hid a deeply selfish nature. For years, he had waited patiently in the shadows, knowing that if anything happened to Mason, he would be next in line for the Harrison empire. Elizabeth's death had been an opportunity. With William emotionally shattered and Mason rejecting everyone, Ryan calculated it was only a matter of time before his cousin crumbled completely. Then he could help by gradually taking control of the company. But Ivy had ruined his plans. Ryan was at the Harrison Properties office when Amanda, the secretary, let slip during a casual conversation that William seemed different lately, happier, more present, all because of the new nanny. The nanny. Ryan arched a perfectly groomed eyebrow. "I thought he'd given up after that string of failures. This one is different. She was a cleaner in the building. William hired her, and apparently she's worked miracles with Mason. And now, well, I think there's something between them. Ryan smiled. A cold, insincere smile. Interesting. Very interesting. In the following days, Ryan began his investigation. He found out where Ivy lived in Hialeah, her history, the sick mother, her humble background. And then he had an idea. He hired a private investigator. Not to find crimes, he already knew he wouldn't find anything substantial on Ivy, but to create a narrative that would plant seeds of doubt in the right people's minds. It was a June afternoon when Ryan visited the penthouse, something he rarely did. "Cousin," he hugged William with false cordiality. "Long time no see. I was missing my favorite nephew." Mason was on Ivy's lap eating pieces of fruit. When he saw Ryan, the baby shrank and hid his face in her neck. "Mason, say hi to Uncle Ryan," William encouraged him. "No." Mason gripped Ivy tighter. "It's okay. He's just in that stranger danger phase," Ryan said, but his cold eyes were fixed on Ivy. "And you must be the famous nanny everyone's talking about." "Ivy Miller. Nice to meet you." She held out her hand, but Ryan ignored it. "William, can we talk in private? Business matters." In the office, Ryan closed the door and got straight to the point. "Are you sleeping with the help?" William was on his feet instantly, his face red with anger. "Watch what you say, Ryan." "Easy, cousin. I'm not judging, I'm just concerned. You know how our society is, especially here in Miami. People talk, and when they talk, it can affect business. My personal life is no one's business, but Mason's custody is. Did you know the judge who approved your full guardianship is extremely conservative? If he starts hearing that you're having a fling with an ex-cleaner, he might question your ability to provide a suitable environment for the child." William felt a chill. "Are you threatening my son?" "Me? Never. I'm just warning you of the risks. It's barely been a year since Elizabeth died. You're already with someone else. And not just someone, an employee, in her 20s. Poor. From Hialeah, no less. People will think she's taking advantage of you. Get out of my house now." Ryan held up his hands in surrender. "I just came as a friend, as family. But fine, I'm going. Just think about what I said. Think about Mason." After Ryan left, William sat in his office for an entire hour, his head in his hands. Those words had planted a seed of fear in his heart. What if Ryan was right? What if his relationship with Ivy could somehow affect his custody of Mason? That night he was distant. Ivy noticed. "William, what's wrong? Was it something your cousin said? He raised some valid points about us, about how people might misinterpret our relationship." "I know he did," Ivy sighed, "because he's right. I think about it every day. Maybe we really should reconsider. Not for us, but for Mason." Ivy felt her heart break, but she nodded. "If that's what you think is best." They didn't know that Ryan was just getting started, and that his next move would be far more destructive than mere words. 3 weeks had passed since Ryan's visit. William and Ivy tried to maintain a strictly professional relationship, but it was like trying to hold back the ocean with their hands. The gazes still lingered. The accidental touches still sparked electricity. The love was there, pulsating, impossible to deny. It was a July morning when everything fell apart. William was eating breakfast when his phone began to buzz with dozens of notifications. Calls from Amanda, from partners, from acquaintances. He answered Amanda's first. "Mr. Harrison, have you seen the news? You're all over the Miami gossip sites." "What news, Amanda?" "About you and Ivy. There are photos and they're compromising." William opened the website Amanda sent him and felt his blood run cold. There was a photo of Ivy, taken with a zoom lens from far away, apparently entering a cheap motel on the outskirts of the city. The headline read, "Widowed mogul fooled by ex-cleaner. See the photos that prove her true character." The article insinuated that Ivy had a double life, frequenting questionable places in her free time. It suggested she was manipulating William and using Mason to get close to his fortune. But William knew that motel. It wasn't a questionable place. It was where Ivy's mother had stayed for a week when she got out of the hospital before going to Fort Lauderdale. He had paid for the stay himself. "This is a lie. It's all a lie," William roared. Ivy arrived minutes later for her shift and immediately noticed something was terribly wrong. William showed her the photos and she turned pale. "But I was visiting my mother. She stayed there because the doctor recommended a place near the hospital before the transfer." "I know, but they've twisted everything. And there's more." William showed her other articles that were popping up, all with the same tone. Gold-digging cleaner, vulnerable widower being taken advantage of, unsuitable environment for a child. Someone is doing this on purpose, William said, his jaw tight, and I know who. But before he could do anything, his lawyer called. William, we need to talk, urgently. Ryan is filing a petition in family court, questioning your fitness to care for Mason. He's alleging that you're psychologically unstable after Elizabeth's death and making decisions detrimental to the child. That's ridiculous. I know, but he has these articles as evidence that you're being manipulated. And worse, he's gotten testimony from the nurse manager at the hospital where Ivy's mother was admitted. So what? She says Ivy abandoned her mother for days at a time, that she only showed up to pressure them for expensive treatments she couldn't afford. Ryan is building a narrative that Ivy is an unstable and opportunistic person. William hung up and looked at Ivy, who was crying silently, holding a confused Mason in her arms. Ivy, he's trying to destroy you to get to me, to get Mason's inheritance. Then I have to leave now. If I'm not here, he has no more ammunition against you. No, I won't let... William, listen, she interrupted him, tears streaming down her face. This isn't about us. It's about Mason. You could lose your son because of me. I would never forgive myself if that happened. Mason started to cry, sensing the tension. Ivy, sad? He touched her wet face with his small hand. Ivy's okay, my love. She hugged him tight, breathing in his baby shampoo smell one last time. William was shattered. He knew Ivy was right. With Ryan's petition and the media in a frenzy, his best chance to protect his custody of Mason was to distance himself from Ivy, at least temporarily. How much do you need for your mother? I'll transfer it now, so you never have to worry about money again. No, Ivy shook her head firmly. If you do that now, it will only confirm what they're saying, that I was after your money. But you weren't. I know, you know. But the world out there doesn't, and in the end, it's their opinion that will decide if you get to keep your son. Ivy kissed Mason's forehead one last time and handed him to William. The baby immediately began to struggle, reaching his arms out for her. Ivy! No! Ivy, stay! I have to go, my love, but you're going to be okay. You have your daddy who loves you so much. She walked to the door, each step harder than the last. At the door, she turned one final time. William, I love you, and that's why I'm leaving. Take care of him. Take care of our boy. And then she was gone, leaving behind the only place she had felt at home in months. William held Mason, who screamed, Ivy, 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 until he was hoarse, and for the first time since Elizabeth's death, he allowed himself to sob uncontrollably. Across town, Ryan toasted with expensive whiskey, satisfied with his plan. He didn't know he had underestimated the power of a broken heart seeking justice. The days following Ivy's departure were a living nightmare. Mason reverted to the state he was in before she arrived. Worse, in fact, because now he knew what he was missing. He cried day and night, repeating, Ivy, 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 until his voice was raw. He refused food, wouldn't sleep, and scratched anyone who tried to hold him. William tried everything. He hired 2 new nannies, both quit on the first day. He tried to calm his son himself, but Mason just pushed him away, desperately looking for Ivy in every room of the apartment. A week after Ivy left, Mason had visibly lost weight. The pediatrician warned William that the child was entering pediatric depression, a rare but dangerous condition in toddlers who have experienced abandonment or loss. Mr. Harrison, your son is wasting away. If there isn't a rapid intervention, we'll have to admit him for forced feeding, said Dr. Mendez with genuine concern. He just wants Ivy. Then bring Ivy back. I can't. If I do, I could lose custody. And if you don't, you might lose your son in a different way. William went home devastated. The penthouse that was once filled with laughter now only echoed with sobs and silence. He picked up Mason. The baby didn't even react anymore, just let himself be held like a rag doll, and went to the room to look at photos of Elizabeth. Elizabeth, my love, help me. I don't know what else to do. I'm losing our son. I'm losing everything. But Elizabeth was dead, and for the first time since her funeral, William felt anger toward her. Anger for leaving. Anger for leaving him alone with so much weight. Vengeance would come from where he least expected it. It was Amanda who discovered it first. In truth, she had her own reasons for investigating, poorly hidden jealousy of Ivy, anger that William had never looked at her romantically in 8 years of working together. But when she dug deep, she found something that changed everything. She scheduled an urgent meeting with William. Mr. Harrison, I need to show you something about your cousin. Amanda, I'm not in the... It's about Ryan and the nurse manager, Ms. Heavens. That got William's attention. Amanda plugged a flash drive into the living room television and showed dated photos. Ryan and Ms. Evans meeting in a restaurant a week before the articles came out, an envelope being passed from hand to hand, bank statements that Amanda had gotten through a shady contact, showing a $50,000 transfer from one of Ryan's offshore accounts to Evans's account. He paid her to lie about Ivy, to say she abandoned her mother, when in fact I checked the hospital visitor logs. She went every single day, sometimes twice a day. William felt a wave of rage so intense he had to sit down. Why are you showing me this? Amanda hesitated. Because even though I may have, she took a deep breath. I liked you, Mr. Harrison, for years, and I was jealous of Ivy. But after she left, I saw what happened to Mason. I saw what happened to you, and I realized she really did love you both. It wasn't about the money, it never was. Thank you, Amanda, seriously, thank you. William immediately called his lawyer and arranged an emergency meeting. With the evidence of the bribery and Evans's lies exposed, they had grounds to dismantle Ryan's petition. The hearing took place 3 days later. Ryan arrived confident, wearing his best suit, a smug smile on his face. But when William's lawyer began to present the evidence, his smile vanished. Your Honor, I present here evidence that the petitioner, Ryan Harrison, fabricated evidence and bribed a witness to defame Ms. Ivy Miller with the sole objective of emotionally destabilizing my client and questioning his parental fitness. The photos were shown, the bank statements, and finally a video. Amanda had gotten more, a recording of Ryan talking to Ms. Evans, discussing exactly how she should testify against Ivy. The judge, a 60-year-old man with a reputation for relentless justice, turned red with anger. Mr. Ryan Harrison, you have attempted to manipulate this court with fraudulent evidence. You have tried to separate a child from his father using lies and manipulation. I'm not only dismissing your petition, but I am ordering a criminal investigation into you for bribery and perjury. Ryan left the courtroom as pale as paper. William felt a bitter victory. He had protected Mason, but at what cost? That night he held his son, who barely reacted to anything, lost in a kind of sadness children shouldn't know, and made a decision. He had won the legal battle. Now, he needed to win the battle for his son's heart, and that would only happen one way. He picked up his phone and dialed the number he had memorized but hadn't dared to call in weeks. Ivy? It's me. I need to see you. Now. Please. Ivy was at Bayside General Hospital visiting her mother when she got William's call. She had gone back to her night cleaning job, but things weren't easy. The gossip had spread, and even in her own neighborhood, people whispered when she walked by. That's the one who tried to take advantage of the businessman. She had a good run for a while, but they finally found out the truth. Poor mother. She must be so ashamed. But the worst part of all was the pain of being away from Mason. Every night she cried herself to sleep, wondering how he was, if he was eating, if he was happy, if he had already forgotten her. When she heard William's voice on the phone, her heart almost stopped. William, what's wrong? Is Mason okay? No, Ivy, he's not okay. He's dying inside. William's voice was broken and Ivy imagined the worst. What do you mean? He's not eating. He's not sleeping. He doesn't say anything but your name. The pediatrician says it's pediatric depression. Ivy, I screwed everything up. I tried to protect him and I ended up destroying him. But Ryan, the petition, it's over. We found out he bribed the nurse to lie about you. He's been exposed. You're free. Your name is cleared. Ivy gripped the phone with both hands, trembling. And you're only calling me now? Because I'm a coward. Because I let fear control my actions. Because I chose the easy path instead of the right one. William paused. Ivy, I love you, and Mason loves you, and none of this matters if you're not here with us. Please, tell me where you are. I need to see you. Ivy gave him the hospital address, and 20 minutes later William walked into the room where her mother was. But he wasn't alone. In his arms he carried Mason. The child was unrecognizable, thin, pale, with huge dark circles under his eyes for a baby not even 2 years old. But when his eyes met Ivy's, something in them lit up. Ivy. It was a whisper, as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Ivy couldn't hold back. She ran to them and took Mason in her arms, and the baby burst into tears. But it wasn't a cry of sadness. It was a cry of relief, of finally finding what was lost. Ivy back. Ivy, no go. He clung to her as if she would disappear again if he let go. I'm not leaving, my love, never again, I promise. Ivy cried as she covered his little face with kisses. Irene, from the hospital bed, watched the scene with tears in her eyes. William was on his knees on the floor, crying too. Ivy, forgive me, for being weak, for letting fear control me, for putting appearances above what really mattered. Ivy knelt beside him, still holding Mason, who was clinging to her neck. William, you weren't weak. You were a father trying to protect his son. I understand, I always understood. But I shouldn't have sent you away. I should have fought for you, for us. And you're fighting now. You're here. William took Ivy's face in one hand, his other hand holding Mason close to them. Marry me. Ivy blinked, not believing what she was hearing. What? Marry me, Ivy Miller. Not because appearances demand it, not because it's the socially correct thing, but because I love you and because life doesn't exist without you. There's only survival, and I'm tired of just surviving. William, I know it's sudden. I know we just went through hell. But life is too short, Ivy. Elizabeth taught me that. She died on a random Tuesday with no warning, and I've wasted weeks away from you because I was afraid of what people would think. I don't want to waste another day. Ivy? Mason asked, his eyes full of hope. Ivy laughed through her tears. I think Mason already gave the answer. So, is that a yes? Ivy looked at the man kneeling in front of her, an imperfect man with his flaws and fears, but a man who loved fiercely, who fought for those he loved even when he made mistakes. She looked at the baby in her arms, who had chosen her when no one else could reach him. She looked at her mother in the bed, smiling despite her illness. And finally, she looked inside herself, at the poor girl from Hialeah who spent her life thinking she deserved nothing but scraps, and she decided to believe she deserved more. Yes, he'll marry you. Mason clapped his hands and gave his first smile in weeks. William kissed Ivy right there on the hospital floor, with Mason between them and Irene applauding from the bed. And for the first time in a long time, the future seemed not just possible, but full of promise. The following days were a roller coaster of emotions and decisions. William didn't want to wait. He had waited too long, lost too much time, and now he wanted to make up for every wasted second. But there were practical matters to resolve. The first, Ivy's reputation. William hired the best lawyers in Miami, not to sue the gossip sites, though he wanted to, but to issue an official statement debunking every single accusation. More importantly, Nurse Evans was publicly confronted. With the bribery evidence exposed, she lost her nursing license and was criminally prosecuted. She tried to redeem herself by giving an interview in which she admitted to lying about Ivy. Ms. Miller was the most dedicated daughter I have ever seen. She came to the hospital every single day, sometimes twice, even while working double shifts. I lied because I was paid to lie, and I have no excuse for what I did. The interview went viral. Suddenly, the narrative changed. Ivy was no longer the gold-digging cleaner. She was Miami's Cinderella, the humble young woman who won a businessman's heart through her genuine kindness. But Ivy hated all the attention. She didn't want to be a success story or a fairy tale. She just wanted peace. It was a quiet evening, 2 weeks after the proposal, when everything finally fell into place. William, Ivy, and Mason were on the penthouse terrace, watching the sunset over the ocean. I have something to ask you, William said, taking Ivy's hand. Besides marrying you? She laughed. I think I already gave you a pretty big answer. I want your mother to live with us, here in the penthouse. Ivy turned to him, confused. William, she's so much better. She can go home now. I know. But family takes care of family, and Irene is family now. We're going to convert one of the guest rooms into an adapted suite for her, with all the necessary medical equipment, and I'll hire a private nurse to care for her during the day, while you're busy with Mason. Ivy had tears in her eyes. Why are you doing this? Why are you so good to me? Because you deserve it. Because you've spent your entire life taking care of others, and now it's time to let someone take care of you. Mason, who was playing with blocks, picked one up and offered it to Ivy. For Ivy, 'cause Ivy good. She took the block and hugged the child, her heart overflowing with love. 3 weeks later, Irene moved into the penthouse. The transformation in her was immediate. Having her daughter close, being in a comfortable environment, having first-class medical care, it all contributed to a significant improvement. She began to walk with the help of a cane, her speech became clearer, and the smile returned to her face. Daughter, I'm going to dance at your wedding, she said one day with determination. Mom, you don't have to. I am going to dance. Even if it's just for 5 minutes, I'm going to dance at my daughter's wedding. And she trained. every day with the physical therapist, fighting against her own body to achieve that dream. The wedding was set for 2 months later, in early September. William wanted a grand ceremony, but Ivy asked for something intimate. Just close family and a few friends. I don't want it to be about the spectacle, she explained. I want it to be about the love, and it was exactly that. The ceremony took place in the penthouse itself, on the terrace overlooking the sea. The sunset painted the sky in oranges and pinks as Ivy walked toward William, wearing a simple but elegant dress she had chosen herself. Mason was the ring-bearer, wearing a tiny tuxedo and carrying the rings on a velvet cushion, which he tried to eat twice. Irene was in the front row, standing with the help of her cane, crying tears of joy. When William saw Ivy approaching, he couldn't hold back his tears. "You are so beautiful," he whispered as she reached the makeshift altar. "You are too," she smiled, wiping a tear from his face. The officiant was an old friend of William's who knew their whole story. "We are gathered here today to celebrate not just the union of two people, but the creation of a family forged not by blood or social convention, but by choice, by love, by courage." William recited his vows first. "Ivy, you came into my life when I was at my lowest, when I had given up on everything, including myself. And you didn't just save me, you taught me how to live again. You taught me that love doesn't just happen once, that pain can be transformed into growth, that family isn't about perfection, but about presence. I promise to be present for you every day of my life, on the good days and especially on the bad. I promise to honor your past, celebrate your present, and build an incredible future by your side." Ivy was crying by the time it was her turn. "William, for years I thought my role in the world was to serve, to clean, to care, always in the background, never in the spotlight. And then you and Mason showed me that I could be more, that I deserved more. You didn't just give me love, you gave me dignity, not just security but freedom, and I promise to give that back to you every day. I promise to care for your heart as I care for Mason's, with gentleness, patience, and unconditional love. I promise to be your partner in everything, your safe harbor, your home. I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride." And as William kissed Ivy, Mason began to clap, shouting, "Daddy! Ivy! Family!" There were only 20 people present, but the joy filled the entire penthouse. Irene, as promised, danced. Just one song, leaning on William as Ivy held Mason, but she danced. And in that moment, none of the trials they had been through seemed too heavy. That night, after everyone had left and Mason was asleep, William and Ivy stood on the terrace holding each other, watching the stars. "We made it," Ivy whispered. "Despite everything, we made it." "I never doubted it," William lied, making Ivy laugh. "Liar. You doubted several times. So did I. That's okay. Doubting is part of it. The important thing is that we kept going, even with the doubts." Ivy turned in his arms and looked deep into his eyes. "I love you, William Harrison. I love you more, Ivy Harrison." And in that moment, with the sea whispering below and the stars shining above, they understood a simple truth. Love isn't about finding the perfect person. It's about finding the right person and choosing every single day to build something beautiful together. 6 months had passed since the wedding. Fall had arrived in Miami, bringing milder temperatures and a particularly blue sky that March morning. Ivy woke up to Mason jumping on the bed. "Mommy, Daddy, Grandma made cake." Mason, now 2.5, spoke in full sentences and called Ivy Mommy with natural ease. William had never forced it, but he was moved when it happened for the first time. In the kitchen, Irene was indeed making a cake, but she wasn't alone. William was making coffee, and a caregiver was helping Irene with the ingredients. The kitchen smelled of vanilla and home. "Good morning, family." Ivy kissed each of them, finishing with a long kiss for William. "Yuck!" Mason made a disgusted face, making everyone laugh. "One day you'll understand, champ," William said, ruffling his son's hair. After breakfast, while Mason played with his grandmother in the living room, William took Ivy to the office. "I need to show you something." He opened a file on the computer. It was an architectural project. "What is this?" "A rehabilitation clinic, specializing in rare diseases like your mother's. I want to build it here in Miami, in the Wynwood area, close to services. It will be accessible to people of all social classes. Those who can pay will. Those who can't will be treated for free." Ivy looked at him, speechless. "It will be called the Elizabeth and Ivy Clinic, a tribute to the 2 most important women in my life. Elizabeth, who gave me my son, And you who gave us our lives back. William, that must cost millions. It does. But what's the point of all this money if it's not to make a difference? You taught me that, Ivy. That true wealth isn't in bank accounts, but in transformed lives. Ivy hugged her husband, crying with emotion. I am the luckiest person in the world. We are the luckiest, he corrected. Me, you, Mason, your mum. We're a family, and families take care of each other. That afternoon, while Mason napped, Ivy was organizing old photos to put in new frames she had bought. She found a photo from the day she met Mason. Amanda had taken it without her knowing, capturing the exact moment the baby launched himself into her arms for the first time. I'll never forget that day, William said, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her. Me neither. My entire life changed in that moment. You know what's funny? I had prayed the night before. I asked for a sign, a miracle, and then you showed up. You think that's what it was? A miracle? I think it was love. William kissed the top of her head. Love has a way of finding you even when you're not looking for it. That night, the four of them gathered in the living room. Irene in her special armchair, Mason between William and Ivy on the sofa, all watching a children's movie. A scene that would have been unimaginable a year ago. Mommy? Mason lifted his little head from Ivy's lap. Yes, my love? You stay forever? The simple question carried the weight of all the insecurities that little boy had lived through. Ivy looked at William, who nodded with a smile, then at her mother, who had tears in her eyes. Forever, Mason. Mommy stays forever. Pinky promise. Promise? He held out his little finger. Promise? She linked her finger with his, sealing the most important pact she had ever made. Mason smiled, satisfied, and snuggled back into her lap, turning his attention back to the movie. William whispered in Ivy's ear, Thank you. For what? For not giving up on us. For teaching me that true love knows no social class, doesn't care what others think, and doesn't bend to fear. You taught me that too. You taught me that I was worth more than I believed, that my past didn't define my future, that I could be loved not in spite of who I was, but because of who I was. Irene, overhearing the conversation, couldn't resist. You two are so sappy, you make me want to cry. But it's beautiful to see, very beautiful. They all laughed, and the house filled with that sound, the sound of a family, not a perfect family, but a real one, built on rubble, forged in pain, but now as solid as a rock. 2 weeks later, William took Ivy on a surprise drive. He drove to Coconut Grove and stopped in front of a small house. It wasn't a mansion. It was a simple 2-bedroom house with a front garden and partial views of the bay. What are we doing here? Ivy asked. It's my first house. I bought it with my first paycheck when I was 23. It's been rented out for years, but the tenant just left. William took her hand. I was thinking, what if we turn it into a transitional home for single mothers in vulnerable situations? A place where they can stay for free for up to 6 months while they get back on their feet, with psychological help, job training courses, daycare for their kids. William, I know you have a dream of helping other women who went through what you did, so let's do it together. The Ivy Harrison Institute for Vulnerable Women. Ivy couldn't hold back the tears. This man, whom she had met as a desperate businessman holding a crying baby, had become her greatest partner, her biggest supporter, her greatest love. How can I ever thank you for all that you do for me? You already do. Every day, every smile from you is a thank you. Every time Mason laughs is a thank you. Every morning I wake up and you're beside me is a thank you. They walked into the house together, already planning renovations, imagining the stories those walls would hold, the lives that would be transformed. On the way home, they stopped at the hospital where Irene had been treated, not as patients but as visitors. Ivy had started volunteering there, talking with other families struggling with rare diseases, offering emotional support and hope. A young mother recognized her. You're Ivy Harrison. I saw your story on TV. My daughter has been admitted for 3 months with a rare disease. Sometimes I don't think I can take it. Ivy sat beside her and took her hand. I know what that's like. I went through it with my mother. But you can believe me, there is light at the end of the tunnel. Keep fighting, keep having faith, and let me give you one piece of advice. Accept help. I spent so much time thinking I needed to be strong alone that I almost lost everything. Let people in, let them help you. The woman cried and hugged Ivy. Thank you. Thank you for giving me hope. When they left the hospital, William hugged Ivy from behind. You're incredible, you know that. I learned from you. No, my love, you were always like this. I just gave you the space to shine. Life went on in the following months. The Elizabeth and Ivy Clinic opened in a beautiful ceremony, with Mason cutting the ribbon alongside his parents. The Ivy Harrison Institute began to house its first residents. Irene continued to improve and had even started giving online cooking classes, teaching traditional recipes. And Mason grew happy and loved, surrounded by a family that proved that love isn't about genetics, but about choice. One night, already in June, Ivy was on the terrace watching the sea when William found her. "What are you thinking about?" "About how strange life is. A year and a half ago, I was cleaning hallways in the middle of the night, with no hope that anything would ever change. And today I have everything." "You always deserved everything, Ivy. You were just waiting for the right moment. And you? Do you regret anything?" William thought for a moment. "Only one thing. I wish I had met you sooner. But then I think that maybe neither of us was ready before. Maybe we needed to go through everything we went through to become the people we are today. People who know the value of love. People who know the value of each other." They stood there holding each other, listening to the sea. Mason slept peacefully in his room. Irene was reading a book in the living room. And in that Miami Beach penthouse, an unlikely but perfect family lived as proof that the best endings are the ones no one saw coming. Epilogue. 5 years later, Mason, now 7, ran through the garden of the Elizabeth and Ivy Clinic, chasing butterflies and laughing. At his side ran his little sister, Claire, 3 years old, the daughter of William and Ivy. "Mason, wait for me," Claire shouted, trying to keep up with her older brother. "Run faster, Shorty," Mason replied, slowing down to let her catch up. Ivy watched from the clinic's terrace, one hand on her slightly rounded belly. She was pregnant with their third child, a boy they decided to name Michael. William came up behind her and hugged his wife, placing his hand over hers on her stomach. "How's our little warrior today?" "Kicking. I think he's going to be a soccer player. Or a dancer. Let's not impose gender expectations," William joked. Irene, now almost fully recovered, walked through the garden with one of the clinic's patients, explaining things about the flowers she had planted herself. "You know what the best part of all this is?" Ivy asked. "What's that?" "That we didn't just save ourselves. We saved so many other people too. This clinic has already treated over 200 families. The Institute has already housed 50 women. So many lives transformed. It all started with you believing in us when no one else did. No, it started with Mason, choosing me when I was just a cleaner with a mopping cart." They looked at the boy who had been the catalyst for everything. Mason was now helping Claire find flowers, the protective older brother he would always be. "He saved us all, didn't he?" William murmured. "He taught us that sometimes the most important things in life come wrapped in the most unexpected packages." That afternoon, the whole family gathered for a barbecue in the clinic's garden. Patients, employees, friends, all there celebrating not just birthdays or achievements, but life itself. As the sun began to set, painting the Miami sky with golden and pink hues, William asked for everyone's attention. "I want to make a toast to 5 years of love, of struggles, of victories, to Elizabeth, who, although no longer physically with us, will always be part of this family, to Ivy, who transformed tragedy into triumph and taught me that the human heart has an infinite capacity to love, to Mason, who with his innocence showed us what's truly important, to Claire and to little Michael on the way, to Irene, an inspiring warrior, and to all of you who are part of this big extended family. Love knows no bounds. It knows no social class. It doesn't bow to the opinions of others. Love simply is, and it's the most powerful thing in the universe." Everyone raised their glasses, and as the glasses clinked under the orange sky, Ivy looked around and realized something fundamental. She had finally found her place in the world, not because someone had given it to her, but because she had fought for it, because she had believed, because she had loved. And in the end, it's always love that wins.